When adults get together as a couple, it typically means they're either married or living common law under one roof. But thanks to the diligence of sociologists and demographers, another option has been uncovered.
According to Stats Canada, a significant portion of couples in Canada don't share the same dwelling. Yes, they are, at least in their minds, a couple in every sense of the word, but for various reasons, they live very separate lives.
And what's behind this phenomena of living apart together? Joining us in Toronto, Square Off's resident social commentator, Valerie Gibson. Here in studio, social worker Gary Dernfeld. Now, Gary, StatsCan says there are almost 2 million Canadian couples who are living apart together, or LAT couples, as they're calling them. Who are these people, and are they, I don't know, just having commitment issues?
No, and what we're seeing is a kind of this U curve where we have persons in their 20s and then older folks, seniors, who fall in this living apart together. The younger couples are typically dating. The older couples are in a relationship for the companionship. Younger couples, it's a shorter term relationship. They don't last as long. The elderly...
What do you mean, why don't they last as long?
You know, they're kind of dating. Maybe they're still living in their parents' basements. Maybe they're away at university and they identify as a couple, but over time it may or may not last. Or they do live together, no longer apart. The older folks, the seniors, they may have lost a partner, they may have been separated or divorced, and they don't want to cohabit, but they want a monogamous relationship and that companionship.
Now, Valerie, my theory is that people that say, oh, I really want to keep my own place, are doing it because they actually haven't met the right person, and they're kind of settling, at least the younger ones.
Maybe the younger ones, but the older ones not. They often decide to live separately simply because it's more practical. They may have elderly parents at home. They may have kids that have moved back in. There may be issues with money and ownership of the house or the condo they're in. But I know a lot of couples that are doing this separate living situation because they find they get their space, their privacy, they get their life and the rest. So they get their cake and eat it, basically. But in my opinion, it's high risk, no matter what your age, because of trust issues. If you have trust issues with either partner, or one or the other, there's going to be a problem. Because really, what you're both doing is living as single people, but then getting, you know, the companionship, the sex, whatever you want to call it, or have, whenever you feel like it. And I think that you may as well just not be a total couple. That, unless you absolutely agree this is an exclusive relationship, which a lot of older couples do say, I want this as an exclusive relationship, but are you going to get it?
Gary, it makes sense in today's world that, I mean, you could have your own place, go to your job every day, not have to, you know, elbow your partner for the bathroom or in the kitchen or whatever, and yet still have a terrific relationship with someone. Might spend the night over at their place, they spend the night over at your place. I don't see anything wrong with couples having their own residence.
I happen to agree with you, and you know, the other term for this is friends with benefits. But these are not, you know, these are not just friends with benefits. These are folks who are identifying that we are in a monogamous relationship. As Valerie points out, though, it can be more difficult for a couple to maintain a monogamous relationship when they live apart. You wind up meeting with other folks, you get introduced to new people, there's different pressures, and there's different temptations. So, and I think that's why these stats speak for themselves. In the younger generation, these relationships are lasting on average about 2.5 years. In the older generation, they're lasting on average 7 to 8 years.
Valerie, what about just a plain old fear of legal consequences? You know, once you move in with someone, it doesn't take that long before all of a sudden you're considered common law and suddenly your things are theirs, and, you know, it gets really complicated if you don't think this is going to be long term. So is part of this just a fear of, like, I don't want to go down that road because I'm afraid of what I could lose?
Yes, absolutely. And although people may not think about that, as they get older, this becomes even more important because you've built up your assets, you've got this house, You may want to leave an inheritance. Whatever it is, you're very careful about your money when you get older, much more careful than when you're younger. And yes, you don't want to give it up to somebody who's just going to move in for a couple of years or whatever and move on. But I think we've missed one point here, is that when you're living together as a couple in the same house, in the same place, there is a certain physical, emotional, and even a chemical bonding that goes on. When you live apart, it's very difficult to get all of that in, and the closeness. It's really just, you're really dating, but exclusively if you're doing that. It's not really a true couple. A couple is a couple that lives together, bonds together, shares together, supports each other that way, in my opinion.
If I may, the other thing that will influence the decisions of seniors whether or not to live together is concern for a burden of care. If you are cohabiting and your partner gets ill in these declining years, that puts a burden of care on the person who is well. And so some folks, again, they want the benefits of the relationships without the responsibility.
But if you're living apart, you can just ignore them. You don't.
That is what is
but
happening.
I think, if I may say, Gary, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Because I found, maybe not the men so much, the men want someone to take care of them. The women do not want to be nurses when they get older.
Val,
and that's what they're going to find sometimes.
Val, let me ask you this. Would there be a fear if you were one of these couples, you had your own residence, you were seeing each other, and now one wanted to move in with the other. The man wanted to ask the woman, let's say, to move into his place or to get a place together. Wouldn't fear of rejection, the possible rejection that you didn't have a future as a couple living together, stop someone from maybe dipping that toe into the water and saying, I guess I'm okay keeping my own place, but I really would like to live with this person?
Yes, I think so. I used to get a lot of letters about that, actually, from older couples who are trying out this situation of living apart. Generally from the men who wanted to move in with the woman, or, have the woman move in. It wasn't usually the other way around. The women actually, when they get older, like their independence. Yes, they like their independence. And they like their, maybe some sex and companionship. But they really don't want to move in with someone. And the men used to feel very rejected by this.
All right, Gary, I think this is going to, we have about 20 seconds left. Do you think this is going to continue growing, or are people going to realize that it's not really truly fulfilling?
No.
Oh, yes,
no, this is going to continue growing, particularly.
As we become more and more shallow and afraid, right?
Particularly for the seniors.
More and more singles. In the 50-plus range, absolutely. And it's going to grow and grow because that's the choices we have now.
Right. All right, Valerie Gibson and Gary Dernfeld, always a pleasure talking with you two about social issues and matters of the heart.
Great
Thanks
to be
for
with you.
joining us.